This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu Al-Samad.
So we've made it to episode 42, where it's solidly in middle age.
Yeah.
I probably made that joke already because I completely forget
well, that's what
jokes I
when you
made.
become solidly middle-aged. You start to forget things.
Yeah. Who are you? Where am I? Anyway, let's...
Or parenting, one of those two. Maybe both.
I think one leads to the other.
Yeah, I think so. One accelerates the other.
Absolutely. But let's just segue into what we're driving. Speaking of acceleration, and I can't make it work. Anyway, you're driving something that actually does accelerate quite well, though.
It accelerates reasonably well. A couple of days ago, I turned back in the 2017 Mini Clubman John Cooper Works. And this is it's the first Mini I've had a chance to drive in quite a number of years. And it's the first, how shall I put this? The first post-growth Mini.
Post-growth Mini. What do you mean?
The first post-growth Mini that I've driven. So the last time I drove a Mini was way back in 2010, and that was just before or just around the time that they were launching the Countryman. So their first crossover, and that was the first Mini that really started to get big. And since then, all the other Minis have gotten progressively larger and larger. And for a brand whose very name is so descriptive of what the car originally was, I'm having a hard time reconciling what's happening with the Mini brand.
Would you prefer they call it like a 7?
Maybe. But, I mean, granted, compared to most of the behemoths on the road in this country, even the biggest Minis are still relevant.
Yeah, but and I agree with you. I was smitten with the first new Mini, the R53. That car, somebody I worked with had one with the S package, and it just the growly little supercharger, and it was very neat. It was tiny and just everything was just done just right. It's just they kind of suck now. They've gotten big and fat and flabby, and they're huge, especially the Clubman.
Well, I haven't driven the the current hardtop, like the classic 2-door Mini hardtop yet in the current third generation. I'm not sure what the code is for it, but even the R56, the second generation, was still really good. It still had that Mini character. The third generation has gotten a little bit bigger, but it's still pretty small. But the
Clubman's enormous.
When the first Countryman came out, everybody was saying, why is Mini making this car so big? And when the new Clubman came out last year, it was
wait though. Let's make sure that I'm thinking of the right car, because I think I'm picturing the Countryman when I say things like it's enormous, and the Countryman is the biggest Mini.
Well, that was actually, it is again now. Okay, so when the original Countryman came out in 2010, everybody complained about how enormous it was for a Mini. And then when the second generation Clubman came out, because the first generation was kind of this odd little sort of wagonish version of the hard.
Right. And it had the clamshell door on one side only, and it was
3-door like the Hyundai Veloster,
right?
And then you had the split rear doors,
right? And they didn't flip that clamshell door. So in the UK, that was always like street side, and
exactly
in the US, that was always traffic side.
But so then they brought out the Countryman in 2010, and it was considerably larger. And then when they brought out the third generation hardtop. They had the classic 2-door, and then they also introduced a longer 4-door version, which was actually slightly larger than the original Clubman. So, of course, that meant when they brought out a new Clubman, they had to make it even bigger. So the second generation Clubman that's out now is actually bigger than the original Countryman was.
Right. But also, now I remember this car, because this car launched in like 2015. And this was said to like herald the new direction for Mini. They were getting away from some of their kitschiness because they felt like they had run the course, and this car was held up as it's the cool uncle. Mini.
I don't know that they've necessarily gotten away from the kitschiness thing, and I'll get to that.
Yeah,
but first thing I noticed about this when I started driving it, the fact that it was when I first walked up to it, realizing how big the thing was. It's almost as big as my wife's Civic. Which is bizarre. Actually, it's actually still about 6 inches shorter than the Civic, but it's heavy.
Yeah.
Because the Clubman, the John Cooper Works Clubman, so you can get the base Clubman with the 1.5 liter turbo, and that comes with front wheel drive. But the John Cooper Works now is only available with all wheel drive.
Right. So it's an all four, and the 1.5 liter is the 3-cylinder, right? That's the triple
3-cylinder, right? So the JCW gets a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo, 228 horsepower, 258 foot-pounds of torque, which is good. But this thing weighs 3,450 pounds.
Holy crap!
Which is 200 pounds more than the first generation Countryman.
That's really heavy, and it's not space efficient either. That's one of the things that I really disliked about it when I took this latest Countryman for a spin the first time I was able to. I was so unimpressed because it's not, the ergonomics are like we said, kitschy, but also like I didn't think I couldn't get the seat in the right position. I couldn't see out right. I thought. I was like, okay.
Well, I mean, you're short, so
yeah.
I can understand you not being able to see out of it. I had no trouble with visibility. Except for the classic problem I've always had with all Minis, because they've always had relatively upright windshields, and so the roof line was is kind of low, and it extends further out ahead of you than most modern cars. And so when you're sitting if you're at the front of the line at a traffic light, you often have to lean forward to see the lights.
It's the Saab 900 posture.
Although it did seem, the windshield did seem to be slanted back a little bit further, a little bit more than the last time I drove a Mini, but you still had to lean forward, as you say, the Saab 900 posture. It's certainly the roomiest Mini I've ever been in. The back seat's actually usable, unlike the original Clubman. It's got a reasonable amount of cargo space in the back. I think it's got about 16 cubic feet of cargo space in the back. So it's actually got a reasonable amount of utility. And with that, the 228 horsepower, 258 foot-pounds of torque, it's even at 34, almost 3,500 pounds, it's still got decent performance, but it doesn't have that go-kart feel that you expect of a Mini anymore. That's gone. I mean, it feels like a bigger, heavier car now, and it still has a lot of that kitsch. It still has the toggle switches. They did move the speedometer from the big center dial into a little cluster on right in front of the driver, because you now have a touch screen occupying that big center dial that was always there before. And of course, it's got iDrive, like any modern BMW.
I believe it's called Mini Connected with Nav.
Yeah, well, whatever. It's still iDrive.
Yeah,
which in general, I have I'm actually quite content with modern iDrive. It's actually pretty decent. I don't have an issue there. Although apparently I figured out what happened to the designer of the original Audi MMI system. He apparently went on to do interior design at Mini, because the Mini suffers from the same problem as the original Audi MMI.
What, everything goes backwards?
Exactly. To go down the list, down the menus, you have to turn the knob counterclockwise instead of clockwise, which, of course, because the menu is on the left-hand side of the screen, which, of course, is curved to fit into this circular dial in the middle there. You've got this arc. And so it's got to follow the arc for the same twisted logic that whoever did Audi MMI used applies here as well. And I suppose, you'd get used to that over time. This is one of those reviewer problems, where we jump from car to car.
Well, no, I think it's more than that. I agree to a certain degree. that yes, it's probably a reviewer problem, but I think it's also like everything else that has a jog wheel on it. We're trained, clockwise is forward, anti-clockwise is backward, and you expect
using the proper English terminology
right.
there.
If you expect to start off at the top of a list and go down the items in the list, you're going to turn it clockwise.
I agree. And, like I said, I think if I lived with it, I'd probably just get used to it.
Yeah.
I'd have to, you'd get that muscle memory.
Yeah.
But I, inevitably kept turning the thing the wrong direction.
Yeah.
During the week I drove.
And I think as a reviewer, you hate it more and more passionately. Faster.
Only because, being, as you say, solidly middle-aged, I'm too old to change. I'm stuck in my way.
Well, I mean, this is an interesting thing, being in a design field too. I'm always kind of thinking about, because I have to, what the user is going to do with this. Even when I'm designing like a landing page, I need to think about, okay, what am I presenting people with? What do I want them to do? Almost like where are the exits? And it's kind of the same thing when you're designing any kind of interface for people. You can get sort of on your high horse and say, well, this is the purity of the theory and all this nonsense, and that's fine. But Joe Carbuyer, who's going to pay for your masterpiece, is going to walk up to that knob and turn it clockwise, and you just have to anticipate it and accept it.
And speaking of other control oddities, I picked up the Mini, when I got back from my trip driving the Cadillac Super Cruise, which we talked about last week. And the first thing I noticed when I got in, I spent like 2 or 3 minutes trying to find the engine start button.
Because it's the toggle, isn't it?
It is a toggle. It's one of the row of toggles at the bottom of the center stack. But, I was looking everywhere else for, a button. And of course there was nothing there. And, I finally realized, oh, wait, it must be this red toggle down at the bottom here where I least expect it. Again, a minor annoyance, that anybody spending, significant amount of time with the car would get over. But, it didn't get me off to a good start with the car.
Yeah, honestly, after that first R53, and I agree, the R56 had some charm. I haven't really loved a Mini like that since, and it's kind of a shame. Like, I feel like the best Clubman is a BMW X1 because it's the same thing.
You may be right,
and the BMW is a lot more useful.
Yeah. Well, no, like I said, this current generation of Clubman, is actually got a lot more utility than the first generation did. With the back seats folded down, there's actually plenty of space in there for cargo. The back seats are actually usable for adults. Not an overabundance of headroom, but other than that, I sat in the back and had plenty of leg room and plenty of hip and shoulder room. So you can carry 4 adults in the Clubman without any great difficulty, and because it's got normal doors now for the back seat, you can actually get in and out without twisting your back around. So it's actually a pretty useful vehicle. It just doesn't really fit the what I the kind of character that I associate with Mini, like the R53 and even the R56, and certainly the classic the classic Isaganos Minis, right? Those were tiny even compared to the R53. So the other issue I have, when the R53 debuted, one of the R53 actually, it kind of changed the way, especially Americans, perceived small cars, because prior to the launch of the Mini in the early 2000s, or the relaunch of Mini in the early 2000s, Americans in particular, Europeans were always into small cars because they paid a lot for fuel. And so they went for small, fuel-efficient cars, and that was great. But Americans always considered small, always had this feeling that small cars need to be cheap. You know, it's like they were buying cars by the pound. And if it was small, you know, it needed to be cheap. And as a result of an unwillingness to spend money on small cars, you know, the manufacturers tended to make them cheap, you know, with terrible materials and poor fit and finish and everything. And when the Mini came along, it was like the first premium small car that actually appealed to Americans. You know, and it was relatively pricey compared to the competition in this country, but it did well, you know, but this car takes that to a whole new level.
Oh, let me guess. Does it top $50,000?
No, not quite.
So it's like 47,
45.
That's I mean, and the issue isn't.
It starts at 25,
right?
Which is not bad, but you know, $45,000 for this thing is kind of expensive.
Well, and it's not that it's not fitted out premium. You know, you do get something for your money, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but it does it feel like you're getting 45,000 worth out of it? Like where does the money go?
I would say probably not. I mean, you know, the materials and the fit and finish is really good. It felt solid and everything, but I don't know. I guess it's just, you know, I think if I had a base Clubman or a Cooper or Cooper S, you know, that was, you know, under $30,000, I'd probably be fine with it. But I think at $45,000, you know, considering that, you know, for example, I can get a Civic Type R, you know, for 36, you know, I'd have a real hard time justifying spending almost $10,000 more for a Mini. And the Type R is a lot faster car and a lot more fun to drive. And it's bigger and has better utility.
But it's not a Mini.
That's true.
You're paying for the exclusivity. I mean, it does.
Well, the Type R is actually more exclusive for what it's worth.
But it's a Honda. Do you see? If we're going to be a nameplate snob, I don't know. I can't justify it. I feel like
I'd focus on the Type R nameplate then, you know, instead of the Honda.
That's true. It carries prestige among those who know.
Yes.
It doesn't sound like it charmed you even with the Mini charms though. The sort of, you know, you said it wasn't really go-kart handling, but you know, its power level doesn't seem like it's a joke. The all-wheel drive is pretty good. It had the 8-speed auto, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
the auto is the only transmission available in the JCW.
Tragedy.
No, wait, sorry. You can't. I'm wrong. You can get a 6-speed manual in the JCW.
Oh, okay, good. See, I feel like, and they're not putting a ton of manuals in the press fleet, and nobody is, and if they were to, I feel like I would come away from a Mini. Even the Clubman, which we've just spent the last 20 minutes sort of professing our dislike for it, I'd come away from that car a lot more positive, I feel, if I had the opportunity to drive it with a manual versus spending a week with it with the 8-speed, which like it's.
I think you might be right. I think I probably would have enjoyed it more. It would have been a more engaging drive with a manual transmission.
Yeah, because it's super dull without it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's not the most aggressive transmission I've ever driven. You know, it's not particular. It doesn't feel particularly responsive when I use the paddle shifters to, you know, tap down a couple of gears, you know, going into a corner, that sort of thing. So it just, I don't know, it just felt, you know, it was quick, but it didn't feel.
Yeah, that's lively. Fair. Wow. $45,000. Did it have like a special color on it or anything? That's just.
It had this dark green that looked really good. But, you know, again, you know, just okay. I don't know. It just didn't do it for me.
All right. Well, while you were driving a Mini, I drove the sort of antithesis of that. I had the Hyundai Santa Fe Limited Ultimate all-wheel drive. So this is the big 3-row. This is the largest Santa Fe. It's not Mini.
Yes, I know that.
It's a pretty good family bus, though. It's absolutely a replacement for the old 3-row wagon. It even feels like that going down the road, and that's not like throwing any sort of criticism at it. It's just a good big. I know it's a crossover, but it doesn't really feel like it. It's definitely more wagony in my opinion. It's got kind of like a low step in height. It looks like a crossover, sure, but it's a wagon. I mean, come on, it's based on the Sonata at some point, I think, kinda.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's based on the Sonata, to the same degree that, a current Highlander is
right.
Vaguely related to a Camry. I think there's, as those crossovers have gotten bigger and diverged from the sedans, they've changed a lot more bits and pieces in there. So it's not as related as it used to be.
Okay, so the family tree has branched, but fine. Whatever. It felt more car-like than truck-like, and I thought that was good. It's a really well done vehicle for its use. The three-row crossovers are, what you're going to use those for. Those are going to be like family cars, and you're going to do family car things with them. I did think that the middle row, where it's two separate seats, that was good at keeping the peace. But you miss out on being able to carry more people because there's a space in the middle. I think that's a fine compromise, though. Overall it's a modern day Hyundai. It was pretty well loaded with tech. It was very comfortable. It was quiet. I was actually surprised how punchy the 3.3 liter V6 is in this, because this is a pretty big vehicle, pretty heavy. And it still felt pretty powerful when you needed some oomph. And it returned 22 miles per gallon in mixed driving, which is pretty much roughly equivalent to good fuel economy from a big wagon since like forever. So yeah, it's just what they've always gotten for as long as I can remember. And one of the things that Hyundai does really well, and we've talked about this, is they offer a pretty solid tech package for a pretty decent price. And so this had dynamic cruise, it had lane departure, a bunch of cameras for parking lots. And I thought the dynamic cruise was pretty good. It was smooth for the most part. It does seem to initiate braking kind of later than I'd like. So I'd be like, okay, system, you're gonna back off a little bit, maintain your stopping distance. So I thought that if it had to deal with a panic stop situation in front of it, it would not start braking soon enough, even with the sort of the forward collision warning and stuff. And it would mitigate, but it wouldn't avoid a collision. And maybe that's a tuning thing. And that's fine. Maybe that's a trick that they program it that way. So you kind of feel like you have to pay attention. And that's how I felt. I was like, I'll put the dynamic cruise on, but I've got to kind of watch it too, to make sure that it's. Yeah,
I don't think it doesn't have full stop and go.
It does.
Oh, does it?
It does. Yeah. I was impressed.
Okay. I don't think they had that on the Santa Fe yet.
It'll stop, and then it'll like ding at you, and then when traffic moves, you just have to either tap the pedal or hit resume. So maybe that's what you're saying, like not full stop and go. It won't automatically resume.
Yeah, but. No, the not automatically resuming is pretty standard for anything that's not like a semi-automated system. But just that it brings it to a full stop instead of quitting at like 15 or 20 miles an hour is what I was referring to.
Yeah. And I was explaining that to my 9-year-old, because he was like, how does it do that? I was like, well, you see, son, it has 2 sensors. I felt very smart. But the overall too, the brakes are kind of touchy. So that's where I felt like in terms of driving dynamics, you get what you're expecting in terms of handling. It has decent power. The brakes felt kind of weak and yet grabby at the same time. So, chalk that up to just another sort of reviewer issue too. Like maybe it was what I was coming from, and it just, you get used to cars, and sometimes it does take a little while, a couple days, a week or so to calibrate your foot. So by the time you're used to it, it's gone if you're a car reviewer.
As far as the driving dynamics go, how did it feel to you? Because I haven't driven the 3-row. I've only driven the Santa Fe Sport, and that one felt kind of soft and mushy, and kind of when you went around corners, it seemed to lean more than I expect of most modern cars. How did the big one feel?
I think that's probably accurate for it. It was soft, but it wasn't floaty. It was you could feel it do a cycle over large bump, and it's a long wheelbase too. So there's some of that sort of long wheelbase feeling to it, where you do feel like the front will go over a bump or a dip, and then you'll feel the rear squat because you're a little further from it. And yeah, it has some body roll and stuff, but again, like I guess my expectation was like, okay, it's a family wagon. So yeah, it's set up to absorb some of those bumps. It never felt harsh, which was nice because in the past, my biggest criticism of Hyundai is their suspensions are harsh, and they've figured that out. So it actually dealt with high frequency stuff really well. And yeah, it soaked up bumps, which led to some floatiness and some body roll, but for what it is, it doesn't embarrass itself. It doesn't feel ponderous, although you definitely feel that it's a kind of a big thing. I didn't feel that it was too bad.
That's good.
You get this one and compare notes.
Yeah, and for what it's meant to be for the target audience, I think it's probably fine. It's not meant to be, a sport SUV, in any, this is not something that, is targeting the likes of, a Grand Cherokee SRT, or even a standard Grand Cherokee for that matter. It's definitely the softer, more family oriented, keep the kids from, getting too bounced around or things like that.
And, it wound up costing about the same $45,000 that, your Mini did for a much more vehicle if you're buying cars by the pound.
Yeah, it's true.
And this was.
Actually, are you getting more pounds with this thing? Because that Mini was pretty.
Yeah, I think this is probably pushing 4,000 something, maybe a little more.
I think you're probably.
And this is the limited, so it had really nice materials inside. It actually. I will say that at 47, the materials feel really nice for 30, 35, almost even 40. But when you get up to like 47, 46-ish, where this one was priced with the way it was equipped, then you start to feel like, okay, the materials are nice, but maybe they're not $47,000 nice. There's that's almost like $45,000 is this uncanny valley where you start to expect just that much more niceness, and we've figured out how to put a soft touch on the places you touch.
Don't touch as frequent.
Yeah, and it was good, but and again, this is loaded, so you're at the top of the range. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere above this, so that's fine. You've got the car. You've got the leather seats. You've got the giant sunroof, which was enormous. You've got all of the tech that they can throw in it. So all of that stuff for not a, I guess if we're talking about like something like the Mini being 45, and there's other cars you can get, right at that price too, like a Ford Flex, you can get equipped up to that level. And I thought this was a much better choice than the Flex. Maybe the Flex has more room, but this was actually better to drive. So yeah, it's not. It doesn't make you feel like you paid too much, I guess. I did have some demerits, though.
Like what?
I feel like if it's a family car, a couple of features that are almost becoming more essential, and I hate to say this, but Wi-Fi hotspot, it didn't have it.
Yeah, that's especially in vehicles of this type, the bigger 3-row utilities and minivans and things like that. The vehicles that you're using to haul the kids around, especially on road trips, having a hotspot in there is a big thing. Did it have Blue Link and like the telematics system?
Yes. I think so. It has that button. I always avoid the telematics buttons because I don't want to talk to the people by mistake. But yeah, it has that up in by the sunroof controls.
Okay. So that means it's got a cellular modem in there. Although it probably is. In that one, it's probably still a 3G modem. It's probably not an LTE modem. So I would expect that when the Santa Fe is getting to the end of its life cycle, and I think we're going to see the new Santa Fe and Santa Fe Sport probably maybe as soon as the Detroit Auto Show in January.
Yeah. I mean,
so those will probably have those kinds of features in there.
Yeah, it probably makes more sense to just sort of soldier on with it now rather than make the change to something that's just going to age out. It's possibly not as insignificant as it sounds to be like, what? Just add LTE to it.
You're right. It's not an insignificant change.
But I mean, even Chrysler. So I had a Ram truck not too long ago that had a hotspot, and it was 3G, but at least it was a hotspot. Like there's, and it's a choice. It's like it's an engineering decision. It's a cost decision. So for whatever reason, it doesn't have it. I also felt like it needed more charging ports and higher current charging ports. So.
Yeah, that's always annoying. When you when they still have only the 500 milliwatt charging ports, which is kind of the minimum for USB. And if you try to use your phone, to stream some music or use Google Maps or something like that, that'll drain the battery faster than that charging port can maintain the battery.
Yeah, and that was exactly what was happening. And another nice touch are 115 volt outlets in these kind of cars. I didn't go looking too hard, so maybe there was one in here that I just missed. So I don't want to completely give it a demerit for that, but having those sprinkled around is nice. And then, from a functional perspective, the third row is pretty low to the floor. So I don't think it would be comfortable for adults on long trips because your knees are going to be high. And with that third row deployed, you've got some cargo space, but I was thinking about a trip. Like if you're going to put two people in the back, the third row, two people in the middle, two people in front, that's 6 people worth of luggage. And I don't think you have that kind of room behind the third row seat. If it's like a weekend or anything more than like some duffel bags or something, Yeah, that is one of the issue with the sort of mid-sized utilities. The not quite as big as say a Chevy Traverse or Ford Explorer. They do tend to with the third row in place being used. You do tend to not have as much cargo space as you might like. Yeah. So my demerits are all generally and the steering's numb. Yeah. Which, who cares in a family car?
Exactly.
So, yeah, you had probably a little bit more fun, even though you didn't like the Mini. But, the Hyundai.
Well, I didn't hate the
Mini.
It's just not as good as I hoped a Mini would be.
Okay, that's fair. Maybe they'll repent. Maybe they'll make a really small car for you.
Well, I mean, they do have the hard top, and I do want to try one of those out one of these days. I mean, I think that one's probably a lot closer to what I expect a Mini to be. Even with the 4-door version of the hard top, which is closer, it's closer in size to the original Clubman, but it has 4-wheel doors. So I think that one, that might actually be a lot more fun to drive than this Clubman was.
All right. Well, I'm sure you'll get in one. And next week we can talk about the very visceral small car I'm driving now. And I can tell you all about it and how much you'll love it. And we should just
And the visceral part is not the actual dynamics of the car, but your feelings.
No, both. Oh, this is a car that you're living when you drive this car.
Well, the car I've got right now that we'll talk about next week is also visceral. Let's put it.
Excellent. I'm sure yours is.
It's in its own unit.
Yours is probably visceral good. Mine is visceral not good.
I don't know.
Okay.
That.
All right. Well, let's move on to topics. Right. I've babbled too long about family cars. So we could talk about the latest, what we do on the show is we talk about sort of latest trends in the auto industry. And what I've seen popping up more and more is they're trying to get ready for the coming wave of non-ownership. And so Porsche Passport was sort of unveiled this week, and it's a subscription to a Porsche versus like actually buying one.
Yeah, I think the first OEM that I know of that did this, that launched this late last year, was Cadillac with their Book program that they launched as a pilot in New York, and then more recently we saw Volvo launch their Volvo Care by Volvo program with the XC40, which you talked about a few weeks ago. And there's a company based out of Atlanta called Clutch, which Cox Automotive is an investor in those guys, and all of these guys, plus now Porsche with their Passport program, these are all subscription services. So just like, if you're, these days, if you use Microsoft Office, instead of going out and buying a boxed copy of Office and loading it on your computer, it's far more likely that you're using Office 365 and paying Microsoft, $5 or $10 or $20 a month for access to all those apps. Same thing with Adobe and Photoshop and Lightroom and Premiere and all their programs. Manufacturers, increasingly want to get you on the subscription train where you don't actually own anything, but you keep paying them, a fee every month after month after month forever.
Yeah.
And you'll never have a time with no car payment.
But that's almost like a lease in that sense. But like, so with the Office 365 fee, it's modest. And even with like Adobe Creative Cloud, which I adore, because you're not buying the box. It's instantly obsolete, but you're paying $50 a month for everything. And you can just download it.
And you get updates all the time.
Right. And that's a really good deal.
Right. And that's actually part of, I think it's part of why manufacturers are doing this. And I've written a post for the Navigant Research blog that should be going up in the next few days, talking about this. But there's a number of reasons why car makers are starting to do this now, and one, is to get recurring revenue. So they don't ever want you to be lacking for a car payment. That's one thing. The other thing to consider is, one of the things that we've seen, one of the innovations we've seen from Tesla since they launched is, the idea of getting over-the-air software updates and getting new functionality in your car through software updates. Well, that's
because they are half baking the cars before they send them out to the field.
Yes, that is true. But if you look forward a little bit, to the era where now we're every car makers are starting to take the idea of automotive cybersecurity very seriously, and they know that in the past, basically once they sold you the car, except for repair parts, they knew that they were essentially not going to get any more revenue from you for that car. That's it. It was not a recurring revenue stream, and so there's less incentive for them to work to develop, to keep maintaining that, except for when non-compliance regulatory compliance issues come up and they have to do a recall. Once they're finished with a car and they ship that, then they're on to the next product, and they're no longer trying to maintain the stuff that they've already got out there in the fleet because there's no financial incentive for them to do that. But if you're continuing to pay for these cars, now there's a business model there that helps to finance ongoing development of those cars, to fix security problems, fix functional problems, ship bug fixes. And then, looking further down the road, as we start to get to autonomous cars and mobility as a service, then, if you're used to paying for this stuff continuously now, then you'll be used to it in the future. But of course, today nobody necessarily wants to be paying continuously for this stuff. So one of the ways that they're trying to incentivize customers is by packaging, you're not just paying, this monthly lease fee, but they're bundling everything together so you get insurance and maintenance, and you're not just getting one car. You're getting access to be able to drive, any of a number of different cars, and swap back and forth whenever you like, or more or less whenever you like.
Right, and so that all sounds good, but what I nearly choked on was the price. Even with the one payment covering roadside assistance, and insurance and everything but gas, does it actually work out to be a good deal? At the cheapest you can do is $2,000 a month. That's a pretty nice mortgage.
Probably not. But keep in mind though, like with a traditional lease, if you go and lease a car, you usually have to put down several $1,000s as a down payment. And
that's
really
stupid.
Porsche, you may be paying, $5,000 or $10,000 down, and then still paying $1,000 or more a month. Plus, you're paying for the insurance and maintenance and everything else on that. Whereas this, for Porsche's got two pricing tiers. They've got a $2,000 plan and a $3,000 plan. The $2,000 plan you can pick from the Boxster, the Cayman, the Cayenne, or the Macan. And then if you want to drive a Panamera or a 911, you have to step up to $3,000 a month. But if you think about what it costs to insure these cars and do all the maintenance on them, it may actually be a pretty good deal.
Yeah,
I haven't really priced it out.
I guess I gotta readjust my plebeian sense of thrift and just understand that these are cars that cost a lot to begin with, and insuring a Porsche is not the same few $100s a year
as insuring a Crown Vic.
Right. And they do come with a $1 million liability policy, and the deductible's $1,000. It's not a terrible deductible. I mean,
when you consider what it's going to cost you to fix, probably almost anything on a Porsche, if you got to pay as $1,000, that's probably not so bad. Yeah, I mean, the policy also has to cover that bus full of nuns you hit with it. So it's fine. Or I don't know. Bystanders as you did your burnout coming out of cars and coffee. Right. And this is Porsche, not a Mustang. I don't. It's a really intriguing concept. I really like the idea that you can sort of tailor the car to your needs, because like we were just talking about, if you need the family SUV for something, you can get one. If you decide you want to commute in something that's a little bit more fuel efficient, although I don't feel like the daily commuter kind of person is who this service here is aimed at. That's a nice touch where you can basically just have access to a fleet of cars and just sort of pick and choose. So right, and that's where the Cadillac book service, I think their price is $1,500 a month, and right now that's just in Manhattan, and that one, if you factor in, what it costs to own a car in Manhattan, that's actually not a bad deal. Yeah. The other one that I mentioned, Clutch. Theirs is a slightly different model because it's not operated by a car maker. It's a separate company, and what they do is they work with dealer groups. And so they handle, all of the logistics and everything. Clutch handles the logistics, and they'll team up with a group of dealers to put together a fleet of cars that are available to their subscribers. And I think they've got 3 different pricing tiers that start at $750 a month and go up to about $1,500 or $2,000 a month. And within each one of those tiers, as they get more expensive, you get access to more expensive cars, and like the top level tier, you get access to things like Aston Martins. But because they're working with multiple dealers from multiple different brands, you actually get a much wider variety of cars to choose from. So, for example, if you need a Suburban to tow your boat to the lake, one weekend, you can get that. And another day you can get a Cayenne, and another day you can be driving a Mustang, or an Aston Martin, depending on which plan you're in there. So there's more variety with that one, and that one I think in the long run that may turn out to be a more interesting, or at least probably in the next 5 to 10 years, until we start getting into autonomous stuff, that may turn out to be in some ways the more interesting model, and the one that might be more successful. It just feels like
sort of like capitalism-driven communism. Like, buy the service so you can share stuff. I mean,
well, I mean that's one way to look at it, or buy the service and you can get access to all of these different cars, whenever you like.
That's true.
Just like you're paying, and I am paying for Adobe's Creative Cloud, and I can use any of the apps that I'm subscribed to, whenever I need them, and don't have to go out and buy each additional one as I need it. I've got them all there.
Right. And you can just download what you need depending on your plan. But right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And obviously, the scale is different, but the basic concept is the same.
Yeah. And I was actually just thinking, a friend of mine, he's in a boat club, which is a very, I give him crap about it, but on the other hand, like when you think of something like a boat that's on par or maybe even more expensive than a Porsche to a certain degree to own and maintain, I gave him enough crap about it, and then like he broke down the cost, and I was like, actually, that's absolutely the best way to enjoy boating because you don't own it. Right. It's like
same thing, I mean, for people that have that are private pilots, a lot of pilots belong to flying clubs,
right,
where they have shared ownership of depending on how big the club is, they might have shared ownership of anywhere from 2 to 10 or 20 aircraft, different general aviation aircraft, and it would be too expensive for any individual to own multiple different aircraft and maintain them. But as part of a club, because they're not they're usually, as private pilots, they're not usually flying them all the time, they can go out and use them as they need.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've gone from being skeptical to sort of like thinking that it's a viable way to do things. And I wonder though, like, we're seeing this at the premium level. What does this look like when say the normal sort of person, are you ever going to get over that hump of like, well, I want to own the car? And what does it look like, for normal people like the poor people like us, or me? Well, I don't know. I can't speak for you.
We only have 2 cars in our garage, and one of them is 27 years old. So, for whatever that's worth, there's actually something along these lines now. With Maven, GM's car sharing service, they have several different services that they're doing now, and one of the services that they have is Maven Home, where they work with apartment building management, and what they'll do is they'll put a car sharing fleet. The original Maven service, what they call Maven City now, was like the traditional zip car style car sharing, where they would have a fleet of cars that were parked somewhere and you could reserve one and rent it for, by the hour as you needed them. The Maven Home service is similar to that, but the fleet of cars is dedicated to the residents of a particular apartment building. And so they'll all be parked in the garage of that apartment building, and residents can use the cars as they need. And they'll have a number of different types of vehicles, ranging from, Cruises and Chevy Bolts, Bolt EVs, to Equinoxes and Traverses. So they'll have a variety of different vehicles that will be available. And I'm not sure. I think it depends, varies from building to building. But some buildings are actually doing this as one of the amenities that they're offering their residents. Giving them access to this, which means that they're probably bundling the cost of it into their rent. But that's at a more mainstream level, not in the more luxury tier. So I think we're going to see more of this sort of thing, and see some sorts of subscription services, more types of subscription services and different types of business models emerging over the next few years as companies experiment with what are customers going to want to do, how much are they going to want to pay for it, and that sort of thing. Figure out what works and what doesn't.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was trying to think, like, what would it need to look like for me to invest in, or like to be just tying myself to, like, I'm not going to own the thing. I'm going to just have access to these vehicles, and what like number per month is reasonable for that? And I mean, well, $750 is a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, do you have a do you have a payment on your Grand Cherokee?
I do, and it's
probably what, $400 or $500 maybe.
It's about $400.
Okay, yeah. So if you could get a subscription service for $400 a month, or let's say for $500 a month that included insurance and maintenance, is that something?
That's a deal.
Yeah.
Like that's a good deal.
And that's the thing is you have to factor in, you're not just paying for the car, but you're also paying for these other components, the service and the maintenance. And, in some cases, maybe parking. If it's in an urban area, you might also have access to parking.
Right.
Which, if you look at a place like Manhattan where parking is $1,000 a month.
Right. Parking is insane.
Yeah. So if you can bundle that in as well, it actually starts to make a lot of financial sense.
Yeah, but I'm going to say, like, at that $500 a month, like, yeah, I'm going to want service, insurance, parking. It's going to come to me with a full tank of gas. It's going to be washed and cleaned and all of that. Some concierge is going to drop it off. Oh, and I don't want, like, the Grand Cherokee Limited for that. No. It's going to be an
track
Overland. Or it's a Summit. It's like, and that's sort of, I guess, the trap that we get in, right? Like, if I'm going to spend the money, especially because you got multiple people spending $500 a month, so they're aggregating the cost, you know that the company's making some sort of, you hope the company's making some sort of profit, or at least revenue, so they can afford slightly nicer vehicles. It's that lease game, right? Like, you lease a slightly nicer car than you'd actually be able to afford. So right. I would hope that if I'm spending $500 a month and not getting anything but usage out of it, it would be something nicer than I would actually buy for myself. But that's just the optimist in me. or the greed.
And I think that's not a totally unreasonable expectation.
All right. Well, there'll be more of this. I feel like this is the future of the future.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We're going to talk about this more. We're going to talk about autonomy more. But let's step back and talk about sheet steel.
Yeah, sheet metal. And it's funny. The financial markets, hate the auto industry because they're nothing but a bunch of metal benders, and maybe stuff like this is maybe why they don't like the auto industry.
Well, okay, so this shocked me because it's a Japanese company, it's Kobe Steel, and they just they have this burnished reputation for, like, just the highest quality stuff, the best, most efficient production. It's the Japanese totally kicked our ass on steel and production and everything, 30 years ago, and they've just had that position, and now they've been caught falsifying data. That's terrifying.
Yeah, it's funny. It used to be, back in the day, that there was, in a car there might be one or two grades of steel that were used to build a whole car, but these days as weight has become an issue and manufacturers have to meet all these crash safety standards and everything else, there's actually, in a typical car today, there's a lot of different grades of metals, not just steel but aluminum and magnesium and of course copper for the wiring. And, all these steels, come at different costs, and they're used in different areas, so in some places you want a really stiff steel, to give rigidity. In other places, you want something that's maybe a little bit softer, as part of the crash structure to absorb the energy of a crash so it doesn't get fed into the occupants. And so the engineers spend a lot of time picking just the right grade of steel for every single part that goes into a car, or the right grade of metal, because most cars today are a mix of steel and aluminum and magnesium and other materials. And so that, there's a lot of effort that goes into designing that and picking those metals, and you expect to get those materials when you order those from a supplier like Kobe Steel or any other metal supplier. You expect to get the right stuff so that it protects your customers properly in the event of a crash. And it turns out that some people at Kobe Steel were shipping metals that were did not match what was on the paperwork that was going with them. And that's potentially going to be a huge problem for Kobe.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Like, it's not such a big deal if it's like, a body panel here and there that you can remove, and like it's still a big deal and it's expensive. But if you're shipping out like fenders and hoods and stuff like that, but if it's like part of the unit body, if it's deep in there, that car's got to go back. They've got to make you whole. They've got to crush it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about something like a frame rail or a B pillar or an A pillar, or some part of the structure, those are not parts that are just bolted together. Those are welded and in some cases glued as well, to give them extra strength. And you can't just take that stuff apart and swap out parts. Basically, if it's part of the main body structure of the vehicle, if it's determined that there's a metal in there that is not going to withstand the crash requirements, they're going to have to buy those back and crush those. And that's going to be way more expensive than, for example, the ongoing Takata airbag recall, which is the biggest recall of all time. I think they're closing in on 100 million vehicles that have airbag inflators that need to be replaced. And I don't think the total numbers for this one are going to be anywhere near that big, but the cost could end up being way more than the airbag recall.
So, like, this is potentially the end of Kobe Steel, if that's the thing that happens.
Depending on how far this spreads, and the latest report today, I mean, we first heard about this a couple of days ago, but the latest report today looks like the falsification of records extends quite a bit further than they originally reported. And initially, and Kobe doesn't just sell metals to the auto industry. They also supply aircraft industry. Like they sell aluminum to Boeing, for example, and to Airbus. So that's not a good thing. Originally, in the first reports, they were mentioning Honda and Toyota as being big customers, but GM is also a big customer of Kobe, and so this could very easily spread far and wide and be extremely costly. It also mentions here in this report I'm looking at space rockets. So I'm not sure if SpaceX buys metal from Kobe or if this might be referring to ULA or one of the other aerospace companies. But this is not good.
Where are you left as like a consumer? Like, do you even trust the car to keep you safe? Like, I'm kind of on the fence. I'm like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not planning on hitting something, but I have less faith today than I had 2 days ago when I first heard about this. That the things are going to do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I don't know that we can trust any big company anymore. Not that we ever necessarily could, right. But I think we at least had our heads far enough in the sand that we thought we could, and now our heads are being yanked out of the sand, and we've got to come to the realization that big corporations simply cannot be trusted.
Yeah, and the reasoning behind this was just because it's expensive to meet those certifications and whatever, or those standards, so they were just making crap up and putting substandard metal out there. Like, why would you do that?
I mean, in the process of making sheet metal, or any metals, there's when they make these alloys, they're all these metals, whether it's aluminum or magnesium or steel, there's the core, the base materials, the base aluminum, in the case of steel, it's iron and carbon, and they mix in a lot of other things to get the right properties that they want. And then as they're manufacturing each batch, they're supposed to test for the various properties to make sure that they've got the right mix in there and that it has the properties it's supposed to have for whatever parts it's going to be used for. And if things weren't mixed quite right, if there was any problem in the process, it's kind of like, if you ever watched Breaking Bad, and you saw what Walter White went through in making his meth, and looking at how he controlled the processes, it's actually pretty similar to the way metal alloys are made. There's a lot, everything has to be kept at just the right temperatures. You got to have just the right mix of all the materials that go in there. The rate at which it's cooled has an impact on what the properties are going to be. If it cools too fast or too slow, it's going to be harder or softer or tougher, or more brittle. And so if there's any process problems along the way, that's going to impact what the end product is. And ideally what should happen is if there was an issue with the process, that should basically go back and be melted down and you start over again. But, and that's one of the beauties of working with metals, is you have the option to do that, but that's also very costly. And, clearly they decided that, no, we don't want to do that. We're just going to ship this anyway.
Right. We're going to make shake and bake metal.
Yeah.
We're going to make, it's the equivalent of making a 2-liter bottle. Let's not discuss our meth experience any further. It's
just a TV show. I'm using it as an example in pop culture that people might be able to relate to if they don't have a degree in metallurgy.
Okay. All right. I mean, this is just another in a string of this stuff too. We had like Mitsubishi for years was just making up fuel economy numbers.
Yeah.
Like, that one I was amused by. They're just like, we just made stuff up.
And of course, as I mentioned, the Takata airbags, Toyo Tire and Rubber had a big scandal a couple of years ago with fabricated data on their tires. So it's not good.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, what's next? I guess. I mean, and to a certain point, like, okay, nothing terrible has happened. But do you know now?
Well, and so basically, we don't necessarily know, because things might have happened that or ended up being attributed to other causes. People may have died for reasons that were attributed to other causes that may have actually been exacerbated, because of issues with the way these vehicles are manufactured. Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, are automakers switching suppliers, or like what's?
It's not that easy. I mean, it's not like there's an overabundance of capacity available, to just say, okay, I'm going to go, to, Hyundai or some other company to get my steel or aluminum,
I've got it.
At Alcoa.
I've got it. This is going to be really, really cynical and political. So just give me a minute. But we have this coal industry, right? And you need coal to make steel. And we have this steel industry. Both of those are not doing well in the U.S. If we want to bring them back and make them great again. Oh, maybe this was a manufactured controversy. Okay, I'm done now.
Yeah, we'll just rebuild those steel mills overnight and start manufacturing steel again.
It's an opportunity. Don't leave it on the table. That's all right.
If anything, they'll probably end up sourcing more of it from China or somewhere else.
Yeah, and I guess it's and so the idea of China making substandard goods and sort of dumping them in this market is we're past that, and that's the question that we get sometimes with, how do you feel about a Chinese car? And I'm kind of like, I have a lot of stuff that was made in China. Some of it's very high quality. Some of it's junk. You only get out of it what you put into it. Same as manufacturing in the U.S., as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. It's only as good as your oversight. So I guess we can be comfortable with that if we're just going to increase our investment in Chinese steel or our purchasing of Chinese steel. I guess that's fine. But it's like, that's like a 2, 3, 4 year process, right? Even to get started versus like we've got to deal with this thing today with COVID.
Yeah. I think first thing they've got to do is figure out, what was what was mislabeled and trace where those products went, which manufacturers they went to and which cars or aircraft or rockets those materials went into, and make sure that they get dealt with first.
That sounds like fun.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, I know that.
Speaking of trusting big companies.
Yeah. I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to bridge. It's just not working. So you take it.
All right. So Waymo, we'll skip the other one that I was going to rant about tonight because we're already running over an hour. But
I'm so disappointed.
Yeah, Waymo, the spinoff from Google that is doing the self-driving vehicle systems, today issued their first safety report, and we'll have a link to it. You can read it for yourself, but it's quite interesting. And earlier this week, I think they started running some ads in the Phoenix area, and clearly, what they're trying to do here is I think they're trying to build a level of trust in their self-driving vehicle systems, their automated driving systems, because I think increasingly, especially for the Silicon Valley tech companies, I think there's an increasing perception that these tech companies perhaps should not necessarily be trusted as much as we have over the last 10 years or so.
You don't say.
Yeah. I mean, I still have, in a lot of ways, I still have a lot of trust in Google, but I think when it comes to stuff like this, especially where it's safety related, I think the trust needs to be earned a lot more. And so they put out this big safety report today that goes through in quite a surprising amount of detail, how their automated driving system works, and what are the components of it? What are they doing to make sure that they're safe? What are their test procedures? It talks about cybersecurity, which is something I don't think that they've ever talked about before. And certainly, most of the companies, certainly I don't think any of the other automated driving company, startups in Silicon Valley have talked about cybersecurity as an element of their systems up to this point. I haven't heard of anybody doing that. So it's pretty interesting, and we'll see if this actually helps them try to build the level of trust that's going to be required in order to get people to actually adopt these vehicles. Because Waymo, I guess, is getting ready to really launch their automated mobility service, at least in the Phoenix area, sometime in the coming months. And so they want to make sure that everybody is confident that, they can get in these vehicles and they'll safely get them to where they want to go.
It's interesting. There's a lot of transparency in this that you wouldn't expect. There's a lot of explanation of their technology and how it works and their test procedures. Have you seen anything like this from other companies that are working on this? This
No.
seems like the first kind of comprehensive thing I've seen.
Yeah, this is far and away the most comprehensive report I've seen of this type from a manufacturer. Well, I don't know, we can really call Waymo a manufacturer, but one of the companies that's involved in this space. Nobody else has done anything like this that I've seen, and a lot of the things that they talk about, in terms of redundancy, among the things that they've done in their latest fleet of the Chrysler Pacifica minivans that they're using, they talk about having redundant compute platforms. So if your main computer goes down for any reason, there's a backup that's able to take over and bring the vehicle to what they call a minimum risk condition, basically to bring it to a safe stop out of harm's way. They've got redundant braking systems, redundant steering systems, all these things, in the last report that I did recently on automated driving technologies. That's something that I wrote about in there quite a bit, about the need for this redundancy. And this is something when a couple of weeks ago when GM introduced the third generation of their automated Bolt prototypes that they talked about as well, although they didn't go into nearly as much detail about what they've done. But, they did talk about the fact that they've built redundancy into their system. And that's something that automakers traditionally have not done with vehicle systems, because they've always relied on the fact that there's going to be a human driver that's available to take over, and that can that can handle the situation if some of the various systems in the vehicle fail. Like, for example, if your power steering dies, you can, the human driver can still turn the steering wheel. You have to put more effort into it, but you can still control the vehicle, or if your brake booster breaks, and if you lose your vacuum, if the vacuum hose falls off or something, you can still press the brake pedal, harder and bring the car to a stop. But if you've got a vehicle that has no controls for a human to take over with, or may in fact be operating, in between passenger pickups with no human on board at all, you've got to have systems in there that can do the same thing if you have a failure without having to rely on a human backup.
Yeah, and like I'm just looking through it, like this actually seems like a playbook to what you need to do if you want to get into this space. Like it's almost like they're confident enough in what they've got going on that they're giving away a lot of information and a lot of thinking. And you could basically use the outline of this to say, well, here are all the steps we need to take and the things we need to be aware of if we wanted to create an autonomous driving platform. You could use this as a playbook. Yeah,
well, I think the things that you see in here, a lot of it are the things that you would normally do anyway. If you're an automaker, in terms of the testing and the safety requirements, they are the things that automakers do day in and day out as part of their validation process. Where what's unique about this is that this is coming from a non-automaker, and it's something that company like Comma AI is probably not even thinking of.
Right. Well, and the Tesla approach is like, just trust us.
Yeah. And
so this is,
and that I would never do.
This is kind of you think they see the fingerprints of like John Krafchick and
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I have no doubt that John was heavily involved in putting this document together.
It's just come out, so I haven't really had a chance to do anything but scan it. And you probably took a little more time to read through it more comprehensively, but it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. And, every company that wants to play in this space is going to have to do all of these same things, I think. I think let's put it this way, any company that doesn't do this, I would not trust, to get into one of their vehicles.
Huh. Well, all right. So we'll have a link to this and we can check it out, and we'll be able to discuss more next week once we have a chance to read through it.
All right. So why don't we hit some Twitter questions?
All right. I actually have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
We didn't really get to it. It wasn't one of the topics this week, but it happened. I think it was early, or it was over the weekend or something. GM bought Strobe, a LiDAR sensor manufacturer. That's kind of a big deal.
It is, but they're not the first to do that. Last year, Ford invested $75 million along with Baidu also putting in the same amount into Velodyne, the company that does all those spinning LiDAR sensors you've seen on all the prototypes up till now. A number of other automakers and suppliers have invested in various LiDAR startups. Delphi, in fact, has invested in 3 different LiDAR startups that each have different technologies. They're all working on various types of solid state LiDAR with different approaches to the problem. They've invested in Quanergy Systems, Innoviz, and LetterTech. And so I think everybody, part of it is that manufacturers and suppliers don't want to be left without access to some of this technology, especially the lower cost stuff that's going to be more viable for production. And increasingly with automated driving, there's a feeling that they need a certain degree of ownership of all of the pieces, both the software and the hardware that are going into these systems, because they're going to be responsible. They're going to be liable for the performance of these systems. And so they want to make sure they understand everything about them. And the only way that they're going to be able to do that is if they actually own it.
Yeah, well, it's probably solid for them at this point too. Well, they've still got the pockets that are deep enough to make those purchases and snap this stuff up. I just thought it was, because from there, GM has the platform. They've got like you were just on the drive with Super Cruise. They've made really deliberate strides, and now to add the sensor manufacturer in-house, they're not there yet, obviously, but having that capability all sort of under the corporate umbrella, that's...
Yeah, and I mean, even Waymo, they started off using Velodyne LiDAR sensors, and over the last 8 years, they've gone from using those off-the-shelf sensors to developing their own and making their own in-house, and that's what they're using on their current generation of vehicles is a complete sensor suite that they have designed and manufactured on their own.
Yeah, and I mean, they get exactly what they want out of it, which I think probably helps them get exactly the performance they want. And we'll see where that goes. It's cool, though. I want a company that GM's going to buy.
Don't we all?
All right, so, Twitter questions. Let's see. What do we have first?
Let's see. Well, first, I'd like to let's see. Where is the... I got to find this one. I think in the, about 11 years or so that I've been an automotive journalist, I've had countless people ask me what vehicles to buy, and almost inevitably they go off and buy something else. But let's see. Oh, it was on Facebook. It was somebody on Facebook that actually had, there we go. Amber sent us a note about a month ago asking about replacing her GTI, and we had a conversation about that. And one of the vehicles that we suggested was the Mazda CX-5. And Amber reports back that she actually went and bought a 2017 Mazda CX-5 Grand Touring, and says Mazdas are really underappreciated in the car market. And I absolutely
agree with that. But if there's any problems with it, it's not our fault.
That's right. But it's okay. We'll hook you up with Robert Davis, Senior VP at Mazda, if you have any issues.
We only drive them when they're brand new, and they're usually pretty nice. So,
what? Well, I've got one that's 27 years old, and it's still great.
Right.
So
there's that.
I'm not complaining.
Okay.
All right. So back to Twitter questions. Ben asks, explain how wheel speed would be synchronized if one axle is gas powered and one is electric.
Okay. See, go ahead.
Just this version of all-wheel drive is frequently mentioned.
Right. That's like through-the-road hybrid.
Yep. And
so my completely non-engineer answer is, well, there's wheel speed sensors, and they'll just match the speed. Like the systems,
that is part of it.
You can adjust the torque from the motor, and does the wheel speed have to actually be? I guess it's equal anyway because it's on the road, right? Like,
yeah, I mean the road surface will inherently equalize the two because you don't have a direct mechanical connection between the two axles with this type of setup. This is commonly used on a lot of all-wheel drive hybrid systems. You'll have electric motor at one axle, gas engine at the other, and because there's no direct mechanical connection except through the road will inherently tend to equalize it. You try to control it as close as you can by the wheel speed sensors and managing the torque output to each axle, but the nice thing about with the electric motors is it's kind of like with a torque converter. If you overdrive it a little bit, put a little too much juice into it, the resistance, will fight back, so it tends to balance itself out. It reaches an equilibrium.
Yeah. Well, and like, that's also sort of the point when you consider, obviously like a through the road hybrid, it's a little different than torque vectoring, but you want to overspeed one of the wheels depending on what you're doing, to get rotation. And so, I'm thinking very specifically about, torque vectoring for improving cornering performance.
Right, but even if you're just driving straight down the road, if you're putting a little too much or too little juice into the electric, especially in the electric drive axle, it will tend to balance itself out, based on the reactive force from the road through the tire. So if you underdrive it a little bit, the road will inherently speed it up, just as it would as if it was undriven entirely. The road is going to keep it going at the same speed as the other axle. And then, if you overdrive it a little bit, you're going to see some slip start to develop there, some wheel spin, and then the stability control and the traction control will cause it to back off a little bit.
So it sounds like they've got it all figured out. Ben doesn't have to worry.
Yeah, it's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Works great on the Honda NSX.
I mean, NSX is for all, so we can all try it, because I haven't tried it yet.
Absolutely.
All right. Next question is, what are you most excited for at the Tokyo Auto Show? Is it the Supra or the Mazda concepts? Jarrett wrote this, and he says for him it's both.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Has Toyota actually acknowledged that they're going to reveal the new Supra in Tokyo?
I have not heard anything official, but I haven't been paying super close attention.
Yeah, I haven't heard any official announcements about a Supra there. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw it there, or they may hold it for LA or Detroit. So we'll see about the Supra, but we do know that we are going to see two Mazda concepts in Tokyo, and those are I think those are actually the ones that perhaps have me more excited at this point. The one teaser image that they released, looks like an RX type sports car. And if that thing's powered by a rotary engine, I will be very thrilled about that. And then the other is going to be a preview of Mazda's new design language, which is expected to be a preview of the next generation Mazda 3, which is one of my favorite small cars.
Yeah, so there's this speculation that they're not going to be a rotary thing, but the sources I've seen that have said anything kind of specific are kind of specious sources. Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily trust them all that much.
It probably won't be a rotary, but you never know. I mean, it could be a hybrid, like an extended range EV type of vehicle using the rotary as the range extender.
Oh, that would be smart.
Yeah.
That's like a perfect use for a rotary.
And, Mazda has gotten a patent on doing exactly that about a year or so ago. They got a patent for using a Wankel as a range extender for an EV. So that would not surprise me at all if they did that, if they showed something like that. And then the Mazda 3 concept is, I think, going to have the Skyactiv X engine in it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
You just talked with Mazda, was it Robert Davis, right? You just mentioned him.
Mm-hmm.
Talking with him about that. So.
Yeah, I saw him last week at a conference here in Detroit. All right, next up.
Hang on. Oh, okay. Hang on. We didn't talk about the Daihatsu stuff that we're not getting. That is I think those are the coolest ones. And we're going to see another Mazda little sports car, right? Or something or other there. Honda. I'm sorry.
Honda. Yeah, I think so. I don't think they've said exactly what that's going to be, but that will probably be something pretty interesting as well.
And I'm not excited for the Toyota, the other stuff, the box thing. No, TJ Cruiser.
No, that. Yeah. I mean, if you're into Land Cruisers, and granted, there's a small but loyal following of the land, the classic Land Cruisers, the FJs, and the last FJ Cruiser as well. You'll probably like this thing, but not something I'm interested in.
It's bad. Okay. Yeah. All right. Sorry. Didn't mean to hold us up. I just wanted to make sure we covered all the concepts.
Jared also had a second question. He's also expecting a child in March. What is your best parenting advice, and how do you get them into cars?
Those are two really long topics. You've successfully gotten them out of the nest, and you go first.
Well, as far as getting them into cars, I can't say that I was necessarily particularly successful on that one, especially with the younger child, who's not really into cars at all. The older one, our older daughter, has actually started to get more into cars in the last couple of years, and is actually seriously considering replacing her Honda Fit with a Toyota 86. So she, as far as how we got there, I think it's, you can expose them to cool cars, but it's going to be entirely up to them if they're ever going to get into them. Parenting advice overall, just do your best to keep your sanity. Just try to stay calm in the storm. Try not to lose it. Especially when they're infants, try to catch some sleep whenever you can, whenever the opportunity arises, because there will be plenty of long nights probably where you don't get nearly enough of it. So naps are good. If you get the kid to lay down for a nap, if you have the opportunity to lay down for 20 minutes at the same time, go for it.
And everybody says that, and you're like, when you're in the situation, you're like, I can't do that. I have so much stuff to do. No, totally take the nap. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like the best.
Whatever it is you might have to do around the house, the nap will actually be far more beneficial. The other stuff can wait.
I also haven't found. So it was important to me to not try to push either of the kids to be into stuff that I'm into. Like they know that I do the thing with cars, and they're mildly interested. I'm really interested in seeing what their reactions are to the cars, but I don't try to sort of force it. I'll ask questions and just be like, what did you think of this? It's funny, they both love vans, like minivans, and when I was a kid, the van was the antithesis of cool. So it's interesting to see that they love them because they sit like kings, and they have windows they can see out of, and the vans usually have TVs. Yep.
That was always a big thing when there were rear seat entertainment systems. They love those.
Yeah. But I haven't really been this is what we do. Like, if they're interested, cool. And like, even with working on the cars, like if they're interested, cool, I'll show you some things. But if you get bored, like, that's okay. Like, go do your thing. And I find that, like, by not trying to get them into cars, they're meet them where they are, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, I wind up doing stuff that's not cars.
Yeah.
with the kids.
And just in general, let them find their own way, figure out what it is they want to do. Find the things that they enjoy, and encourage that, within reason, of course.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot more basketball than I have wrenching on vehicles lately. I will say, I got my son Need for Speed Most Wanted, and he's 9, and that was something. He loves video games, and he liked, like, there was some Lego game that he had. I forget what it was, like Lego City Undercover. And so you drive around in that game, and he knew all the cars in that game and all of the things and the goals. So he was exposed to the sort of that idea of a game. And then the Need for Speed game, the graphics are that much more interesting, and the cars are, it's funny. He learned all the cars. He's like, Dad, I won the Koenigsegg.
Right.
He couldn't say it, but he was like,
nobody can.
Right. But that game has gotten him super into cars. Like, he loves the Raptor, and it was nothing that I pushed. I was like, hey, I think you might like this game. He picked it out. That's been over the last 6 months or so. That's gotten him really into cars. So now he'll like drive around, and he'll ask his mom questions like, Mom, do you like cars? Do you like trucks? And, not being a rabid fan like the rest of us are, like, normal people are kind of just like, well, I mean, kind of. I like to go places. So
they're a tool.
Yeah, they're a thing. So yeah, I my best advice for parenting is just try not to be too tightly wound. I do not succeed. That's all.
Just relax and go with the flow.
Yeah. You could get a little drunk every day. That usually helps if you have a problem relaxing. It works.
And on that note, let's why don't we call it a night?
All right, cool. We did have that's a long question. Maybe we'll save that till next week.
Yeah, good idea.
Okay, all right. Anyway, I'll let you get to bed. So we'll see everybody for episode 43 soon. Thanks for listening. Drop us a line. If you have any questions, we are wheelbearingscast@gmail.com, and you know where to find us on the social medias. So we'll see you next week.
And don't forget to give us a rating or a review on iTunes or wherever else you happen to find us.
Only good ratings.
Yes.
The best.
We love the ratings we've gotten so far, so just keep it up.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye.